Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L, here to do the My Hero Academia chapter 348. My thoughts, my impressions, my review here. I'm feeling a little bit better, but I'm still also a little bit under the weather. Anyway, hey everyone. So this chapter is the chapter where Toga goes even more crazy, or just Toga is Toga. That's all that really happens in the chapter. Very quickly, what I want to say is just in general, if I wasn't doing YouTube or anything like that, my thoughts for the chapter would just be like, oh, okay, not like the best chapter in the world. I'll just wait till next week, or just, moving on. It's just, I don't really care that much about Toga. I don't care about her character. I do like seeing the absolute, just the way she falls. I like seeing the destruction of her because I don't think she's that great. So there's that kind of cathartic factor. I gotta say, like, this week, the spoilers were also really interesting. I think the final translation is better than the fan translation. I think so. I think a lot of things are a lot more clear in the official translation. So White Despair, you were right to wait for it. The official translation is really good. I think that was solid, and overall, yeah, I think this is still consistent with some of the things that we've been saying about the chapters. I think that the author is not going to be the best at leading up to the fights, but I think once the fights start going, they're going to be really, really good. This is consistent with it. There is just a lot of things going on. I've seen people wonder, like, why are we even doing this? It just feels kind of like a waste. It also it's worse if you don't like Toga that much. I do think for this one, he just wanted to get it out of the way, the idea that Izuku didn't know that Toga liked him. And there's a few things he does in the chapter which I think are a little silly, and it just kind of shows that the setup is not great here, because there are some lines that occur that are just kind of asinine to even have to read. But overall, yeah, it's just one of those chapters. When I read the spoilers in the fan translation, I didn't think this was... I thought this was the worst chapter here in Academia. It's so hard to quantify that, but it's definitely not one of my favorites. Maybe still probably like the top 10 worst. But otherwise, yeah, it's just one of those chapters. Trying to think of what could be interesting here. I think the ultimate thing with the chapter you have to realize is that it's one that's... This whole thing that happened, it's because the narrative requires it to occur, right? They need Izuku, or like, I guess the author needs Izuku to know this was a thing. Maybe he'll build on it later. I don't know how he's going to do that with the timeline that this guy is talking about, but okay, maybe he'll do it later. And then in terms of Ochako, the reason Izuku can't do that much here is because this is Ochako's fight. And just very quickly, to quote what the author has said about this situation before, just so that we're all clear, whenever anyone asks, why didn't Izuku do more in this situation, like, this is just what I'm gonna read. This is what the guy has said. Frankly speaking, Toga is a character that was created specifically for Ochako. Very interesting, because he's also the guy that said that he had to redo Toga after he realized she was popular. But anyway, he developed Ochako to match Toga, which is also incredibly concerning, because the idea of Ochako being developed to match Toga, like, at the time that this comment came out during Jump Festa, and like, the development was mostly Ochako talking about how much she likes Izuku. Anyway, I don't know if I'll be able to answer your expectations regarding how the Ochako and Toga plot will end, but I put my heart into drawing it. Fully, I believe him, but that's ultimately what's going on here. It's the Ochako-Toga plot. That's how he looks at it. That's why Izuku has to be a little bit controlled in the situation. At the end of the day, it's going to be Ochako leading the charge here. If we get any little bit of Tsuyu in there as well, that would be lovely. If Tsuyu is able to say some last-minute things to Toga and really, like, break her psyche, I would appreciate it. But this is the Toga-Ochako show, with just, the opening. Izuku finds out a girl likes him, I guess. Thank God for Tsuyu. Anyway, this chapter has a few cool little things going on in it, so let's get into it. So in the fan translation, the first page is pretty useless. In the official translation, it is also pretty useless, although the official translation is still a little bit better. So what I mean by that is just the page 1 works specifically to justify page 2's reaction of Izuku opening his mouth. So just to give you the example, Izuku, 9th user, not in an important little bit of detail because we already know that. key to the particular battle. We already know that. The second panel in the fan translation got people really... They got people really... I'm still just remembering it. People got really excited about that because it just made All For One look really stupid. Props to the official translation for not making All For One look very stupid. Because pretty much that second panel is just saying that One For All is the only quirk that All For One had ever obsessed over. Like, as a fact, I can believe that. Yeah, I believe this is the only quirk he ever obsessed over. There is something valuable in saying that he's obsessing over it. Like, if you're calling it obsession, then, you know, you're putting One For All above New Order in terms of how All For One sees it. This kind of stuff just opens it up for All For One having an extremely emotional connection to One For All, which I think is the case personally. Anyway, the first two panels serve to hype up Izuku as this really important fixture, right? On the third panel of that first page, what I thought was interesting was just how the narration makes it kind of feel like Izuku's in the wrong for not realizing that she likes him. And I like how he says that, oh yeah, Izuku encountered Toga a number of times by this point. And I'm thinking, like, how many times? Like, you could cross someone 50 times on your way to work every day. But like, that says nothing. That says nothing about whether or not you should realize whether or not that person likes you. It's a really stupid narration for this part. It's just really silly. When it says he never realized the way she felt about him, it really should read, he never realized the way the person that tried to kill his friends and harm his teacher felt about him. That makes everything sound a little bit nicer. But yeah, you know, I'm just reading this again, and I just think I love how, like, Horikoshi makes it seem as if this is the most natural thing in the world. Since she never came out and admitted her feelings. Guy, he would never... Okay, whatever. Point is, page 1 is there just to justify why Izuku has this freak out. I do like the narration on this box. That is closer to what we got in the spoilers. Because of all his triumphs, at the end of the day, Izuku is a damn nerd. The translators were saying that for the damn nerd line, it's said pretty neutrally. It's not Bakugo saying it. So that narration is ultimately neutral. And it's not Izuku speaking, most likely. This is just an interesting situation where it looks like the author just making, like, you know, a light round of fun at Izuku. Page 1 is just there to say, yeah, Izuku's a super important guy and all that, but at the end of the day, he's still just a kid who's never had a girl confess to him, even if she is a psychotic murderer who he has seen stab his teacher before. You know, Izuku has priorities. Anyway, page 2, Toga reminds us that she likes Izuku because he was covered in blood, and reminds her of her first crush. So great. Page 3 is where everything starts to fall apart. This is not one of my favorite faces for Toga. And then we find out Izuku's ideal date. A lot of people had a really nice reaction to this. I don't really care. Like, what does it matter? Like, we just got told he doesn't really have that many social skills. Like, I guess it's cute and adorable. Someone pointed out, Izuku wants to split a crepe with people, but splitting a crepe's actually very hard, because those things are extremely messy. So, this is not very practical. And I was thinking about it, yeah, like, I only ever buy crepes for other people. I don't really share my crepe. I guess you could cut a small piece of it. Anyway, I think one thing that has to be appreciated here is that Horikoshi went for some comedy. I mean, like, I don't know what else you could call it when you have Ochako shaking with, well, I don't even know what to call it. She's shaking with something. We move on into page 4. It was an interesting page. I think Horikoshi probably felt really impressed with the artistry. I think so too. And then page 5. Page 5 is one where there's a lot of changes between the fan translation and the official. I like the official more because it's a lot more reasonable. I think it's, yeah, you know, Toga will be one step ahead if she's stealthing. That's what stealth does. I really did enjoy Izuku's explanation of things on page 5. It was a lot more coherent than the fan translation. So just to point little things out, on page 5 you can see that Izuku's using Black Whip to use something as a shield against the water. That's actually a really cool detail. Really glad I could see that here. Then we have him talking about how he understands how Toga feels. Now, I gotta say, I do kind of wish we had a Dark Izuku level of him being able to talk to his villains. I think it would have been interesting if instead of saying I don't know, he could have said something like I just want to stop you from hurting other people, or I want to help you, something like that, or I want to save you. I feel like, you know what, it's generic, but maybe I want to save you would have been a really good line here instead of the I don't know. It's unfortunate. I just wanted to see more of that confidence that we saw when Izuku said to Shizaki that he had to be truly remorseful to apologize to Eri. Izuku says that he understands how, or he gets how Toga feels. I don't think he does, and I think he proves it immediately when he specifically compares it to All Might. He wants to be strong like All Might, and he understands it in the sense like trying to be like someone else can feel fulfilling. But fundamentally, what he's talking about is having a role model and trying to be like your role model, trying to do the things your role model is doing, not becoming the person, right? Fundamentally different thing. So I think this is, when you look at it, it's great setup because ultimately Izuku doesn't know what he's talking about and he doesn't fully appreciate what's going on in this girl's head. That said, for this portion of the conversation, I think it was good. When Izuku says that he would never want to hurt someone he loves, that's when he ultimately breaks Toga, because that is the big thing. And this is where you really realize Toga is just a child. The moment she hears something she doesn't like, she shuts down. Toga's also incapable of thinking of other people, so she's okay with hurting other people, but God forbid someone try to hurt her, right? So the moment that Izuku says that he can't fathom doing things the way Toga does, she breaks down and starts comparing Izuku and Ochako to all the worst people in her life. And you know what, it's also just funny. It's funny that like Horikoshi uses the panel of Ochako saying like, you have to live with the consequences if you're going to be hurting people. It's like, yeah, it just reminds you how ridiculous this whole thing is. On page 7, there's a lot of critical things here. Okay, you know what? On page 6, the shot of Toga looking sad was good. On page 7, we have Toga's approach. Now, one of the coolest details of page 7 is that Danger Sense activates again, and you can see it in the way that the panel is constructed. That's why Izuku is able to dodge it, or able to react. So that was actually pretty good. It shows us that Toga legitimately did stop loving Izuku at that moment. The flexibility in her thoughts indicates probably in the future that the author could be like, oh yeah, hey guys, she's back to loving them, she's that crazy. And then we just have to say like, yeah, that's pretty much who Toga is, so I guess so. Also on page 7 we have Toga talking about who the heroes see as real people. Honestly, the thing is, if Toga was to say that the heroes don't think she's a real person, I don't think I would even care. I would agree, and then I'd be like, yeah, you know what? It's unfortunate, but you're a murderer. You've tried to murder many people, and you've succeeded at murdering many people. You're also crazy. You don't like listening to people. You don't like being told you're wrong. You don't like being told, like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be doing the worst things in the world. Maybe moderate it a little bit. Mind you, this is where I would have really loved to have Izuku just say, like, hey, maybe we can calm it down here. But, yeah, no. I feel for Toga initially because of the situation with her quirk and the mentality that led into the situation. But at this point, she's done so much damage that she really is a menace, just keeping her out and about with the rest of the world. So when she ultimately says that, you know, they're destined to remain apart, a good chunk of that, like Toga, like many of the other villains, are just self-destructive. Much like how Twice pretty much screwed himself over when he just used his quirk willy-nilly. Toga just kind of screws herself over, but she does it by not listening to people. Page 8, we have Izuku getting away from Toga pretty well. And then we have on page 9, Ochako coming in and tackling her to the ground. On this page, you have Toga acknowledging how quickly she gets over people. When she says she's over Izuku, yes, very confirmed given the way the panel was constructed on page 7. And it just again shows you just this reads like a child throwing a tantrum, especially with the world rejected me, so I reject the world. Yes, she was being told not to do certain things, but then she went and sucked the blood out of a perfectly innocent boy whose only crime was getting her attention. Yeah, no, man, like that poor guy, he must, if he's still alive, he's scarred. So I would really love to know what Toga thinks about that guy. Anyway, page 10 is the wonderful floppy kick as Toga gets caught by Black Whip. Ochako also gets cut by the knife. Now, I'm seeing this here, that knife did fly away, so hopefully that knife is far away from her. The big question now is, of course, if she doesn't like Ochako, can she use Ochako's quirk? I think eventually she'll be able to use other people's quirks without the love component, but for now, maybe this will be a good thing. Okay, so on page 11, something kind of critical happens. after Froppy comes in. Froppy saying that we don't need to be talking about romance, one of the greatest things. It really makes me hope that we're going to see a lot of Tsuyu just telling Toga to shut up. The thing that happens on page 11, though, you do see that Toga was able to cut Black Whip. If there was going to be a moment where Izuku should have been efficient, it probably would have been now, before she cuts it. Instead of checking on Ochako, maybe just squeeze Black Whip a little bit to break a few bones. That would have been the best shot. Also, Izuku can send multiple strands of Black Whip, so he could have just kept tying her up. The most efficient thing, honestly, would have been to keep tying Toga up, restrain her arms, and then have someone else come and tie her up. In an ideal world, you probably could have had Tsuyu jump onto Toga's head and just smash her head into the ground until she was unconscious or something like that. There were many ways to deal with the situation, but at the end of the day, this has to be an Ochako and Toga fight, and if Tsuyu helps out, then great, but that's... what can you do? There are other comments that are made on this page, like she's the least predictable of our opponents. I don't think so. I think they get a lot of easy hits on Toga. I think the least predictable of the opponents is Shigaraki. Like, quite literally, he turned into a hand monster. No one saw this coming. Toga? We all saw her talking about love coming. Alright? Like, this girl is not unpredictable. Well, she's not the most unpredictable is what I would stick with that one. Okay, we go on page 12, and this is another spot where you kind of see like how the author is kind of forcing the situation, where you have Tsuyu say that Urari has gone up against her more times than anyone. I want to point out, that is not impressive. Ochako has at best gone up against Toga 3 times, if you count provisional license. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but it's Forest, Provisional License, and War. 3 times. And one of those times, she did not fight Toga while Toga was using her quirk. So, that's not a good reason. Honestly, that's not a good reason at all. You want to use a girl who's in her first year of high school instead of maybe like a hero with sensory capabilities that has experience fighting someone who stealths or someone who cuts people up all the time. You know, like okay, look, the reasoning is not the best. It just, if you read it as she's gone up with Toga 3 times, so she'll take the lead here. It does sound kind of ridiculous, but you know, in the context of the manga, it makes sense. Again, like the author just wants to justify it. He's looking for all the little reasons he can to justify these things. Fair enough. You know, it's technically true, good enough. At least he gave us a technical truth here. I am not jealous of the guy. He's trying to make all these things work, and you know, some of them are not going to be the best setups. Ochako already is a very difficult character to work with, and having a situation where you made a character for Ochako to face, you know, that's not going to be the best when Ochako herself doesn't have very dramatic rhetoric, right? One good thing that really comes out of this here is that Toga with these flying projectile syringes or needles, whatever you want to call them, you know, this could allow, if she's going to be using these projectiles, maybe Ochako will be able to use her whip. You know, you can kind of imagine maybe a fight with multiple rocks flying against these, I don't even know, like mentally controlled rocket needles. Yeah. So Ochako's physics controlled meteors versus Toga's mind-controlled rocket needles. I'm sure that'll be an interesting fight. Anyway, at the end of the chapter, Izuku dashes off. I know there was a commenter, Davion Blair. I think that's the last one, right, Davion? Or Davion was thinking that the Nomu was going to pursue Izuku. I'm not too sure. I feel like Izuku might make a run for it here. So yeah, that's it. That's the end of chapter 348. I don't really have anything more to say. My voice is still a little bit hurt, so I can't talk too much more. Yeah. Was the whole Toga Izuku, like Izuku coming to this island, a waste thing? Not really, because the author wants to keep Izuku away. It's not a waste in that sense. He gets to tell Izuku that, hey, Toga likes you, but you know, what does that really matter if you're insane? But whatever. Yeah, I think this is just indicative of the fact that setting up these fights or the lead up to the fights are not going to be the best. But the fights themselves are probably going to be pretty good. I'm sure the author is thinking about all these cool dynamic scenes he wants to do, and it's like, oh man, how do I get to this? You know, how do I get to point B from point A? Like, I don't know, man. I think that's actually a really hard part. Like, the fights are what everyone's really excited about, but justifying a fight can be very challenging at times, especially when you have characters that don't really have that much to them. At least, and I gotta like put an asterisk on that, specifically when it comes to combat. Like, again, Ochako I think is a good character, but she's just not very compatible with Hero Academia. Anyway, at that point, I think that's all I want to really talk about. Guys, thanks for watching, and till next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day. I guess the last question is like, how long is it going to take Izuku to actually get to the next battlefield? You know, it's going to be incredibly ridiculous if Izuku goes through every single battlefield, but if he does that, that would be pretty iconic. It'd be a pretty funny moment, and actually, you know what? If the author does it, I will defend it, even though it would be just so incredibly unnecessary. Anyway, yeah, this time for real, guys, thanks so much for watching. Until next time, hope you have an absolutely great day.